All right, friends, today we're talking about what tracking your doses actually teaches you using an edibles journal or note-taking. It's a topic we haven't really talked about yet on this show, so I'm excited to bring it to you today. I'm your host, Margaret, a certified gangier and TCI certified cannabis educator, and I believe your kitchen is the best dispensary you'll ever have. Welcome to Bite Me, the show about edibles. Grab a snack and let's dive in, friends. So let's start with a scenario that I know at least some of you have lived through before, and it's when you make a batch and you're feeling confident. You've made this recipe before, or one close to it, and you eat a piece and you wait and you feel something. It's working. Great. And you have another piece because the first one was maybe small and you weren't feeling it that much and you feel fine. And then you go about your evening. And then an hour and a half later, the couch swallows you whole in your entire plan for the night, which was maybe just watching TV and folding laundry becomes a survival mission. Or the opposite happens. You eat the thing, you wait 2 full hours, like a responsible adult, you feel absolutely nothing. So you have another piece and still nothing. You go to bed vaguely annoyed, and then you wake up at 3 a.m. convinced you are extremely high. Both of these situations are completely avoidable. And the fix is usually pretty simple. You got to write it down. I know it sounds like a lot for something that is supposed to be fun and relaxing, but stay with me because what I want to talk about today is what actually happens when you start tracking your edibles. And I promise that it's not boring or clinical. It's one of the most useful things you can do if you want to stop guessing and start actually knowing how cannabis works in your body. So here's the thing about edibles that trips people up more than any other form of cannabis is that, and I'm sure you can relate to this, the feedback loop is slow, like really slow. We all know when you smoke or vape, you feel it in minutes, 30 seconds, a minute. And if it's too much, you adjust next time. The data point is right there. It's immediate. The loop closes fast. With edibles, you eat something at 7 in the evening and you might not feel the full effect until 9. You might feel it again in the morning if you overdid it. And the gap between what you did and how you feel can be enormous. And that gap is exactly where all the confusion lives. I've been making edibles for over 10 years. I spent 2 years working at a dispensary as well. And I can tell you with complete honesty that even with all that context, edibles still surprises me sometimes because there are so many variables. What you ate that day, how much water you drank, how much sleep you got, your stress level, your potency of the batch, which depends on your starting material, your decarb, your infusion time. It's a lot of moving parts. And the only way to actually start making sense of all those moving parts is to track them because your memory is not going to do it for you. How many times have I said, write things down because you think you'll remember? I have said that many times because I have been guilty of that same thing myself. So I'll make the case for tracking by making the case against relying on your memory, which is what most people do, which is what I have definitely done. You eat an edible, it goes well or it doesn't, and you sort of remember that, and next time you adjust loosely based on a general impression of how last time went. Maybe you remember that 2 pieces was too much, but do you remember what you'd eaten that day? Do you remember what the batch was made from? Whether you ran the decarb at the right temp, you improvised a little, how much flour you used in your infusion to begin with. That's the one where I've really sort of messed up, is thinking I'll remember how much flour I used in an infusion from batch to batch. And here's the part that actually really matters. After a few batches, all those loose impressions start to kind of blur together. You think you remember, but what you actually have is a kind of a composite of several experiences that were all slightly different. It's like trying to remember a specific Tuesday from 3 months ago. You know roughly how that period of time felt, but the specifics are gone. And tracking replaces that blur with actual data. And once you have actual data, you can make actual decisions. Okay, so what does tracking actually mean? What goes on the paper or on the screen? And I want to give you a practical picture of this because I think most people imagine it to be more complicated than it is. You're not running a clinical trial. You do not need a spreadsheet. What you do need is a few consistent data points captured consistently. On the making side, you want to track what you made, when you made it, what cannabis you used, and its approximate THC CBD content. If you have it, how you decarbed it, how you infused it with, measurements. the rough dose per serving. On the consuming side, you want to track the date, the time you took it, the dose, maybe what you'd eat in that day, your general state of being, what time you started to feel the effects, and what the experience was like and how long it lasted. And that's it. That's pretty much the system. And it takes a few minutes to fill out. And I know some of you are already thinking, I'll do this for 2 weeks and then forget to do it. And that's fair. We're going to talk about how to actually make that stick. But first, let me tell you what you get in return for those few minutes of tracking. When you have a few weeks of consistent tracking, patterns start to emerge that you would never have noticed otherwise. And some of them can be surprising. The most common one I see is what I call the empty stomach trap. A lot of people discover through their own notes that the same dose hits completely differently depending on whether they ate a full meal that day or barely ate anything. On the days they were running low on food, the exact same piece from the same batch can feel significantly more intense and come on faster. The data shows that, right? The memory, not so much. Another one is timing. People track when they took the edible, when they started feeling effects, and over time they get a personal onset window. For me, that onset window is pretty reliable. For other people, it's all over the map, and that variability is useful to know. If your data shows wildly inconsistent onset times, that tells you something. It tells you the variable you need to look at harder is probably what you're eating before you dose. Sleep and stress can also show up in the data in ways that surprise people. And when you're exhausted or running on pure cortisol, the same dose can feel heavier. And your notes may show that as well. You're starting to see a pattern where the Thursday evening dose at the end of a long week, probably not sleeping great, running a little ragged, consistently hits harder than a Sunday afternoon dose when you've had a real rest. That's your endocannabinoid system talking to you through your data. And we just did a whole episode on the endocannabinoid system to tie this in. And on the making side, tracking your batches teaches you about your own process. So if you always decarb at the same temperature, but you're using 3 different strains over the course of a year, your notes will tell you which ones produce the most effective batches. You'll start to have opinions and preferences, actual knowledge about what works for your body, made from your kitchen using ingredients you sourced and understood. And that's not a small thing. That's taking control of your high life friends in the most literal way possible. Can I get a hallelujah? Amen. The Bite Me Edibles Journal. You knew it was coming, and yes, I'm going to talk about it, but I want to put it in context first because the point of today is not to sell you the journal. The point is to sell you on a habit. And the journal is a physical book available on Amazon. I designed it specifically for edibles makers and consumers who want a dedicated place to track both the making and the using. And it has prompts built in, so you don't have to stare at a blank page and decide what to write. It covers batch notes, dose logs, experience tracking in one place. And if you're someone who likes a dedicated tool for a dedicated habit, it's a solid option. And obviously I'm biased. And also I made it because I wanted a journal created by an edibles lover like myself. And what I also like about it is it's not just for edibles makers. You can use a lot of the tracking if you're buying edibles at a dispensary. In the interest of honesty, the journal is not the only way to do this. And it's not even necessarily the right way for everyone. The right tool is the one that you will actually use consistently. So let's talk about your option. You have physical notebooks, and the physical notebooks, plain composite notebook, a Moleskine, a dollar store notepad, whatever. If you already have a journaling habit, this might slide in easily alongside it. The downside is that searching back through your notes takes time. You're flipping pages, not filtering. The upside is that writing by hand has a way of making things stick. You remember what you wrote. The act of writing it slows you down enough to actually think about the experience. So the physical notebook, along with the Bite Me Edibles Journal, both fall into this category. And for some people like myself, I love a hard copy of things. I have notebooks for different purposes. I prefer hardcover or hard copies of books versus audiobooks or ebooks. Some people have that preference. Then you have phone notes apps. This is probably one of the most accessible options for a lot of people because we both know the phone's already in your hand. In fact, you're listening to this podcast on your phone. Apple Notes, Google Keep, Notion, Bear, whatever you already use, you can create a template Save it, paste it each time. The search function is your friend here. And over time, you can search it by strain name or by date and find patterns quickly. And the downside is that cell phones are so full of distractions. I'll just open my phone notes app to make some recordings, and then 30 minutes go by and you didn't actually even do that. So we've all been there. There's also dedicated tracking apps, and these are apps built specifically for cannabis consumption tracking. They vary in quality and features. Some handle the complexity really well. Others are more consumer focused than maker focused. So if you're tracking both the batch and the dose, you might find yourself working around the app's assumptions. Worth trying if you're a data forward person who likes dashboards. When it comes to apps as well, I often always check what data that app is tracking. This is probably outside the scope of this particular podcast, but it can be shocking sometimes. So keep that in mind too, especially if it's a free app. They are often tracking you all across the internet. Of course, there's spreadsheets. Some of us love spreadsheets. I'm not one of those people, but don't underestimate this one. If you already love a spreadsheet, this is a powerful option. You can build in columns for every variable, use filters, chart your onset times over months. It's the most flexible format available. It's also the most friction heavy to set up if you're not already comfortable with it. So the Bite Me Edibles journal sits in the physical notebook category, but with all the prompts already built in, so you don't have to design the system yourself. And that's an advantage. If you want it ready-made and purpose-built, grab a copy. If you're already a dedicated journal or spreadsheet person, use what you've got. The system is the point, not the tool. So how do you make the habit stick? Because I already said that I would talk about how to actually keep doing it after the initial enthusiasm wears off, because that's the real challenge. A few things that actually work. First, track immediately after, not the next day. The next day, your memory is already degrading, already kind of, getting fuzzy. Fill in your notes while the experience is fresh, even if it's just a few words at the time, and you come back to it to add more detail later. This can apply for a lot of things, just beyond tracking your edibles consumption. Second, keep the tool in the same place as the thing. So if your journal or notebook lives in the same drawer as your edibles, you will see it at the moment that you need it. So if it's across the room or in your bag or buried under a bunch of other stuff, you'll skip it. And friction kills habits. Remove the friction. Third, accept incomplete notes is better than no notes. Some nights you're going to write 3 words. That's fine. Brownie, 10 p.m., good, is more useful than nothing. Perfection is not the goal, consistency is. And let's be honest, nobody else is reading these notes as long as it makes sense to you. Fourth, review your notes occasionally, not obsessively, but maybe once a month. Flip back through your notes and see what you notice. This is where the patterns are going to come out. And they don't reveal themselves by entry. They reveal themselves when you look at a month or 2 of entries all together at the same time. And that review is what keeps the habit feeling worthwhile, because you start to actually see what you're learning. So here's what I hope you take away from this episode. Your body is doing something pretty complex when you consume an edible. It's metabolizing cannabinoids through your digestive system, converting them in your liver, responding based on your weight, your fat content, your gut health, your hydration, what you ate, how stressed you are. The idea that any of us could intuitively figure out the perfect dose by feel alone without any record keeping is kind of absurd when you lay it out like that. Tracking is how you stop guessing. Also how you stop having the rough night that ruins edibles for you for 2 months. And it's how you stop landing in that annoying felt nothing zone and just eating 3 more pieces because you're impatient. This is where the edibles personality quiz can come in. There's something more than just harm reduction here. When you track your making and your consuming, you start to become someone who actually knows the relationship with the plant. You know your onset time. You know your sweet spot. You know which batches sing and which ones fall flat and why. You know that Wednesdays are probably not the right night for a strong dose because your Wednesday body is not your Saturday body. And that knowledge is yours. It lives in your notes and it compounds over time in a way that no amount of asking Google or reading Reddit threads can replicate. So your kitchen is the best dispenser you'll ever have. And your notes are the operating manual. So if you want to grab the Bite Me Edibles journal to make this easy, I'll link to it in the show notes. If you want to use a plain old notebook or your phone, that's equally as great. Pick the tool, build the habit, and see what it teaches you. That's the point of this episode. And before we leave today, I want to ask you, Have you been tracking your edibles experience, and what patterns did you find emerging from your tracking? Is there anything that I missed? Let me know. Send me a message. I always love to hear from listeners, and we can always dig into it some more over the Bite Me Cannabis Club. With that, friends, I'm your host, Margaret. Stay curious and stay high.